Cabeza de Vaca suffered for 8 years what few men in history could imagine. Shipwrecked, enslaved, and stripped of every comfort of civilization, he walked barefoot across an unknown continent, clothed in rags, sustained only by faith and by the fragile hope that somewhere beyond the horizon, his God and his country still remembered his name. Along the way, he became a wandering miracle healer, curing the dying with his breath and the sign of the cross. His legend spread across the land like fire. The story of how he got here is truly remarkable. It all started in 1527 when a Spanish fleet set out to claim new lands. Cabeza de Vaca would be the treasurer of this expedition, a cautious and pragmatic man with a deep Catholic faith, yet before a single sail was raised, a Moorish woman gave a chilling prophecy. She warned one of the officers' wives that the voyage would end in ruin, that none would make it back, and if any man did, it would only be by the miracle of God. When the ships departed, she told the wives left behind to remarry and forget about their husbands, for they were never coming home. On June 27, 1527, Captain Narváez set sail under royal orders. His mission was to conquer and govern the vast lands between the River Palmas and the Cape of Florida. His fleet numbered 5 ships and around 600 men, soldiers, sailors, and officers. Their first stop was in Santo Domingo on the island of Hispaniola, where they lingered for 45 days gathering supplies. From there, they sailed to Cuba, where the governor sought more provisions. Cabeza de Vaca and Captain Pantoja were sent ahead to collect supplies, but their mission ended in disaster. As a tropical storm gathered strength, the sea rose and the sky blackened. Once inland, it turned into a hurricane, striking with unimaginable fury. The town and its churches collapsed. The wind was snapping trees like toothpicks. By morning, the sea had swallowed the fleet. On Monday morning, we went down to the harbor, but did not find the ships. We knew the ships were lost, and we walked along the shore to see if anything could be found of them. We found the little boat of a ship lodged upon some trees. 2 bodies were found belonging to my ship, and some lids of boxes. But the persons were so disfigured by beating against the rocks that they could not be recognized. Months later, when Narváez finally reached them, he brought with him a new brigantine and a new pilot, a man who swore he knew the northern coast and the River Palmas well. Trusting him, the governor gathered 400 men and 80 horses aboard 4 ships, and the brigantine set sail again. But as they turned south toward Havana, another storm rose up from the southeast, and they were at the mercy of ocean currents and its wind. When it finally ended, they found themselves cast upon an unknown coast, the wild shores of Florida. There on April 12, 1528, they dropped anchor by the modern-day Tampa Bay. They entered a village and traded with nearby natives for fish and venison. De Vaca wrote about a gigantic communal house that could hold 300 people, and among the scattered nets they found a single gold trinket, a spark that fed their hopes of riches. Narváez raised Spain's standard and claimed the coast for Emperor Charles. Only 42 horses survived the storm and hunger. The natives returned, motioning for the strangers to leave. With no interpreter, there was only silence and warning gestures. Despite their situation, they were still hungry for gold, and Narváez led 40 men north along the bay, Cabeza de Vaca among them. They captured 4 guides who led them to a small maize village. Inside were Spanish chests filled with desiccated bodies wrapped in painted deer hides. It appeared that these bodies of unknown Spaniards were being worshipped as idols, and the friars had them burned. The natives spoke of Appalachian, a land rich in gold. Against Vaca's warning, Narváez marched inland, leaving the ships behind. It was this choice that would doom them all. On May 1st, 1528, Narváez abandoned the ships and marched inland with 300 men. 40 of them were mounted, but their horses were very weak. Each soldier carried only 2 pounds of biscuits and half a pound of bacon. For 15 days, they wandered through endless forests, finding nothing to eat but bitter shoots of palmetto. They finally reached a large river that they crossed on makeshift rafts against a rough current before stumbling upon a native village rich with maize, their first real food in weeks. Despite De Vaca cautioning against going further, Narváez pressed forward toward the rumored land of the gold that the natives had spoke of. And this march was brutal. They waded through rivers, swamps, and forests, all while getting pounded by thunderstorms. 1 horseman drowned crossing a river. They were being guided by a local chief, and they finally reached the village of Appalachian. They found only women and children. It was oddly quiet, and before long, arrows started to rain down on them, killing a horse. The village warriors had returned and quickly scattered back to the forest. They dealt with these on and off again attacks for days. Inside the settlement, they discovered maize in abundance and deer hides. The village itself was small. The Spaniards saw many animals, deer, bear, and critters with a pouch that carried its young, their first glimpse of a possum. But it became very apparent that there was little gold to be found here. Their guide would inform them that this disappointing village of Appalachian was actually the richest town of the region, and that beyond that, it stretched only wilderness, swamps, and scattered tribes. Desperate for food and safety, Narváez decided to turn south to a village called Outweigh, said to have maize, beans, and fish. Throughout their entire march there, they faced an invisible enemy firing through the trees. A nobleman was killed, and the wounded groaned throughout the nights. When they finally reached Outweigh after 9 days, they found only ashes and empty huts. They set up camp here, many of the men very sick. They faced constant attack, and the dream of conquest was fading into a fight for survival. How could they possibly escape this cursed land? And the answer was to build boats and take to the sea. They had no nails or tools and not one man skilled in shipbuilding. Yet desperation gave them ingenuity. A soldier fashioned bellows from wood and deerskin. Nails were hammered from spurs and stirrups. Sails were sewn from shirts. Ropes were twisted from horsehair. The only carpenter among them led the work, and after months of hunger and struggle, by September 20th, 5 crude crafts were ready, each to carry about 40 men each. They killed the last of their horses for food, stripping their hides for water skins, and twisting their manes into ropes. When the final animal was slain, the men wept openly, for the horses had carried them through storms and swamps in Spain. In remembrance of their sacrifice, they named this place the Bay of Horses. Before we embarked, there died more than 40 men of disease and hunger, without enumerating those destroyed by the Indians. By the 22nd of the month of September, the horses had been consumed, only one remaining, and on that day we embarked. The boats were so crowded that we could not move. They waded waist deep through shallows, lost sight of the coast, and drifted 7 days before reaching an island. There they seized canoes and found dried mullet and roe, the first food in days. It was now 5 days since we had drunk. Our thirst was so excessive that it put us to the extremities of swallowing salt water, by which some of the men became so crazed that 3 or 4 suddenly died. When they finally reached calmer shores, friendly natives met them with pitchers of water and cooked fish, but that night the natives attacked, wounding Narváez in the face. The Spaniards fought through darkness, every man hurt, before driving the attackers away, taking 2 captives with them. The next day they burned the enemy's canoes for warmth, and 3 days later they sailed on, still starving, still praying. A Greek sailor went ashore with Indians to fetch water, and he never returned. Days later, storms and hunger tore the fleet apart. Narváez's faster boat broke away despite Cabeza de Vaca pleading to stay together. Each must do what he thinks best to save his life, Narváez said before vanishing into the surf, never to be seen again. For 4 days, Vaca's boat drifted, all the men half dead, collapsing from hunger and cold. Only he and the pilot had enough strength to row. Nearly dawn, a massive wave flung them ashore, their bodies scattered in the shallows. Crawling to safety, they kindled a fire, roasted a little maize, and drank rainwater. Cabeza de Vaca sent one man, Lope de Oviedo, the strongest among them, to climb a tree and survey the land. He returned saying it looked like a pasture land, as if cattle had roamed there, a hopeful sign they might be near Christians. When he returned, 3 natives followed him to the shore, soon joined by hundreds more with bow and arrows. The starving Spaniards could barely stand, much less fight. Cabeza de Vaca and the royal assessor went forward to meet the warriors, offering beads and trinkets and peace. The natives accepted, giving arrows in return, a sign of friendship, and promised to return with food the next morning. At dawn, the natives returned as promised, bringing heaps of fish and roots pulled from beneath the water. At last, the Spaniards felt strong enough to try the sea again, and after digging out their buried boat, the men pushed it into the sea. 2 waves struck, one soaking them, the next flipping the raft. 3 drowned, and the survivors crawled ashore half dead, their boats and clothes lost. At sunset, the natives returned with more food, only to find the strangers nearly dead. Seeing the corpses of the drowned men, they began to cry. Moved by compassion, they carried the survivors to their village. Along the way, they built fires to keep them warm, and by nightfall, they had built a shelter with flames and food. The natives danced and rejoiced and welcomed them. The Spaniards rested and regained their strength. One day, Cabeza de Vaca noticed some Spanish items that they were wearing that he did not give to them. This is a clue that others like him were nearby. He sent 2 natives and 2 of his own men to investigate, and before long they returned with astounding news. There were more survivors. It was Captain Andres Dorantes and Alonso del Castillo, with the crew of another lost boat. The reunion was bittersweet. Joy at seeing one another alive, but grief at the sight of each other's condition. With winter coming and no way forward, they had no choice but to stay on the island. This area was near the modern-day Galveston, Texas. 4 of the strongest, which included a man named Figueroa, had volunteered to swim and walk westward toward Panuco to seek rescue. They left with a single native guide carrying the last hope of the Narváez expedition. On the island of misfortune, the natives decided that the starving Spaniards should become physicians, whether they wished for it or not. Among these people, healing was done by breath and touch. They blew upon the sick, laid hands on them, and believed illness could be drawn out and cast away. When Cabeza de Vaca and his companions refused, insisting they knew nothing about medicine, the natives simply stopped feeding them until they agreed. They finally decided to give it a shot, and de Vaca tells a remarkable story. Our method was to bless the sick, breathing upon them and praying to God our Lord that He would give health and influence them to make us some good return. In His clemency, He willed that all those who we supplicated should tell the others that they were sound and in health, directly after we made the sign of the blessed cross over them. For this the Indians treated us kindly. They deprived themselves of food that they might give to us. According to de Vaca, their prayers had worked, and word started to spread among the natives. Even with their growing popularity, starvation still shadowed them. Cabeza de Vaca sometimes went 3 days without food, surviving only on prayer. The tribal people, the Capoques and the Hans, were enduring the same misery. There just wasn't much food to go around. After Dorantes and Castillo rejoined the others, only 14 Spaniards remained alive, but many of them would soon die. Cabeza de Vaca, gravely ill and stranded on the mainland, could not join them. Soon he found himself enslaved by islanders, forced to dig roots in icy waters until his fingers bled. When he could bear this life no longer, he escaped to the mainland tribes, surviving as a wandering trader. Carrying seashells and beads, he bartered along the coast for food and shelter. His reputation grew, and every village welcomed him for his goods. But for nearly 6 years he lived impoverished among them, always seeking a way to rejoin his countrymen. But at last, one day, he would encounter another Spaniard. It was Lope de Oviedo from the island. Most were dead, murdered, or starved. Only 3 still lived: Castillo, Dorantes, and the Moor, Estevanico. Broken by fear and exhaustion, the 2 men went their separate ways, trying to survive. Cabeza de Vaca pressed on alone into the wilderness. But 2 days later, he would run into these 3 survivors. The tribes who held them had come inland to gather walnuts, their only food for months. A native who pitied Cabeza de Vaca helped him slip away through the woods to meet them. When Dorantes saw him, he was struck speechless. They had long believed Cabeza de Vaca was dead. The reunion was overwhelming, 4 broken men thanking God through tears for being alive. They decided to wait 6 months until the tribes moved south for the prickly pear season. This fruit, blood red and sweet, was the only food for 3 months every year. In the meantime, Cabeza de Vaca, struggling to hang on, became a slave again, occasionally meeting with the Spaniards when their masters would cross paths. He learned the full horror of what had become of Narváez's lost boat. Stories carried mouth to mouth across the coast. A man named Esquivel lasted the longest, surviving by cutting and drying the flesh of a dead Spaniard until natives found and enslaved him. Later, he would be killed after a woman dreamed he would harm her son, a dream that sealed his fate. 3 times Cabeza de Vaca would try to flee his masters, and 3 times they hunted him down, trying to kill him. Each time, by what he called the mercy of God, he survived. When the season of prickly pears returned, they reunited, Dorantes, Castillo, Estevanico, and Vaca, all in the same region, where they planned their escape once more. But their masters would move again before they could flee, driving the groups apart. Vaca told his companions he would wait among the prickly pear groves until the full moon, then go alone if they did not come. When the time came, Dorantes and Estevanico appeared, saying they knew Castillo was nearby. They gorged themselves on the juice of the prickly pears, their thirst never fully quenched. And on the 2nd day after moving camp, the 4 survivors entrusted themselves to God and fled at last. By evening, they saw smoke rising in the distance and followed it, finding a friendly native who led them to his people. A new tribe who spoke a different tongue, but they knew of the healers and their miracles. They welcomed the strangers joyfully, bringing them prickly pears and food. That night, for the first time in years, the wanderers slept in peace. The natives soon came to Castillo and de Vaca, complaining of terrible head pain. He asked for them to heal him. After he made over them the sign of the cross and commended them to God, they instantly said that all the pain had left, and went to their houses, bringing us prickly pears, with a piece of venison, a thing to us little known. As the report of Castillo's performances spread, many came to us that night sick, that we should heal them, each bringing a piece of venison, until the quantity became so great we knew not where to dispose of it. We gave many thanks to God, for every day went on increasing his compassions and his gifts. After the sick were attended to, they began to dance and sing, making themselves festive until sunrise. And because of our arrival, the rejoice continued for 3 days. At sunrise, more natives arrived, carrying 5 people, crippled and near death. Castillo prayed over them, making the sign of the cross, and by morning time, all rose up, healed and strong. The miracles filled the tribe with awe, and for the Spaniards, it rekindled faith that God had not abandoned them. Word of these cures spread rapidly. Tribes from every direction came seeking healing. When summoned to treat another group, Cabeza de Vaca went himself. One man appeared already dead, eyes rolled back, pulse gone. Vaca prayed and breathed over him, and by the next day, the man was walking and eating again. The natives started referring to them as children of the sun, believing that they could raise the dead. Committing themselves to God, they took leave of the natives, who showed them the path toward another tribe nearby that spoke a similar language. Not long after, they saw 2 women and some boys walking in the woods. After some signs of peace, the natives came forward and led them to their dwellings, about 50 houses in all. Cabeza de Vaca describes some similar customs that all these tribes shared. When a woman became pregnant, her husband refrained from sleeping with her until 2 years after the child's birth. Children were nursed until the age of 12, since famine was so frequent. The mother's milk often kept them alive when food was scarce. If a person fell sick and could not travel, the tribes left them behind to die, except in the case of a son or a brother, whom they would carry on their back. Men without children changed wives freely, while those with families remained faithful. The natives kept constant watch when danger was near. All night they lay awake with bows beside them, creeping silently from their huts to study every sound and shadow. As the Spaniards moved on, they now had native followers, believing in their miracles, and they started to see a troubling pattern. Each new tribe welcomed them kindly, but the natives that were with the Spaniards plundered their host homes, leaving nothing behind. The victims remarkably consoled them, saying their loss was worth it for the honor of seeing the children of the sun. When a native with an arrowhead lodged near his heart was brought to them, Cabeza de Vaca cut open his chest and removed it. The man recovered the next day without pain, and word of the miracle spread across the region, winning the healers even greater reverence. Their company sometimes grew to thousands, and the people refused to eat or drink until the 4 had blessed their food. The travelers crossed dry, rugged mountains and a deep river before reaching fertile plains, where the sick recovered and the people showed great obedience. They discovered settled villages with houses, beans, pumpkins, and maize, the first real signs of agriculture since Florida. They rejoiced and thanked God. In one town, the people gave Dorantes more than 600 deer hearts, and the Spaniards named it the Town of Hearts. The explorers found a sword belt buckle and a horseshoe knell on a native, proof of other Christians. The natives informed them that bearded men with horses and lances had passed through. The Spaniards thanked God, but as they moved on, they saw the devastation those men had caused, burning towns, enslaving families, and many people were hiding in fear. Near the mountains, they found traces of gold, copper, and iron, and at last the tracks of horsemen. After years of wandering, they had reached the edge of the Spanish conquest. And after 10 leagues, he encountered 4 Spaniards on horseback, who stared in disbelief at his ragged appearance. Cabeza de Vaca told them that Castillo and Dorantes were nearby with a large following, and Alcaraz sent riders to bring them in. Their long captivity was finally over. But when Alcaraz tried to enslave the natives, anger erupted. Cabeza de Vaca was not happy with this, for he owed his life to these native people. But really, there was nothing much he could do. The 4 survivors were sent to Culiacan, in the modern-day state of Cineola, and once again almost died of thirst along the way. In 1536, the 4 reached Mexico City, welcomed with honor by the viceroy, and after 2 months' rest, Cabeza de Vaca sailed back to Spain, ending his 8-year journey across the land and sea. Before this voyage had began, a Moorish woman had prophesied a disaster. Her words were proven true. Of the 600 who left Spain, only 4 returned alive: Castillo, Dorantes, Estevanico, and Cabeza de Vaca. Thank you so much for watching my videos. That story has always captured my imagination. I first read about it probably 3 years ago in the book Conquistador Voices by Kevin Siepel. And any time in life where I'm feeling some hardship, I think back to Cabeza de Vaca, the impoverished natives, and really just all the immense suffering that went on for those 8 years while they marched across lands that they weren't familiar with, on the coast of Texas, without food, hardly any water, and he somehow managed to survive. It's an amazing story, and to be honest, 30 minutes doesn't do it justice. There are several things that probably got left out. But thanks again for watching my videos. If you'd like to support my work, I got these amazing maps here. We got the 3D National Parks map, which is one of my favorites that Mirway Maps has. They also have state maps. If you want to go check out their state maps, go search your home state. Those are really popular over there. I also have a members only channel where I have exclusive content for $5 a month. But really, you already support me by watching and enjoying these videos. Thank you so much. It's much appreciated. I've had a lot of fun making them. If you could like, subscribe, and leave a comment, it'd be much appreciated. And stay tuned. We got a lot of stories and history to cover. Take care.